The air inside the Liberty Naval Academy auditorium pulsed with anticipation. Proud families packed the rows of folding chairs, fanning themselves with printed programs. The lights were dimmed just enough to make the stage glow like a promise. Streamers in navy blue and silver twisted down from the rafters, and banners bearing the Academy's crest lined the walls with stoic pride. It was a big day, graduation day, a day some parents had dreamed of since the moment their children. Enlisted. Near the very back of the hall stood Master Sergeant Elijah Briggs. He wasn't supposed to be standing. He had a seat, or at least he should have. He'd RSVP'd months ago when the email came through. He filled out the form online, printed the confirmation, and even called the school twice to ensure everything was in order. Still, here he was standing in the far corner near the exit doors, while dozens of others with pressed suits and expensive perfume were ushered down the center. Aisles like royalty. Elijah didn't complain. He never did. He wasn't the kind of man to make noise unless it was necessary. And today, the only thing that mattered was watching his son, Micah, walk across that stage. He adjusted his hat slightly and smoothed out the wrinkles on his dress. Blues, they didn't fit like they used to. His chest had widened over the years, his back had thickened, but they still held up. The ribbons on his left side shimmered with 100 stories, each one earned in the dust and fire of war zones. Most civilians would never know. The Combat Action Ribbon. The Purple Heart, the Navy and Marine Corps' Commendation Medal, and then some. No one in that auditorium knew the full measure of what those colors meant. Micah did. Elijah's eyes scanned the stage, finally landing on his boy third row, second. From the right. Back straight, shoulders squared, face stoic and focused. He looked good in uniform, the white fabric crisp against his brown skin. His jaw strong and calm, just like his mother's had been. Elijah's chest ached in a way no wound ever had. Micah had always been driven, top of his class. First to volunteer. Captain of his battalion training unit. Everyone loved him, staff, instructors, even the other cadets. But no one, not one person in this room, knew how hard Micah had fought to get here. How many nights he cried alone after his mom passed. How he spent birthdays and holidays eating boxed dinners because his dad was deployed. Somewhere he couldn't even pronounce. Elijah had missed a lot school plays, parent-teacher meetings, even Micah's high school graduation. But not this. One. Nothing on this earth would keep him from this one. That's when he saw them 2 security guards moving toward him through the crowd. The first was tall and square-jawed, with close-cut hair and a rigid posture that screamed, "I wish I was military." The second was shorter, heavier around the midsection, and already looking at Elijah like he didn't belong, they approached with practiced ease, as if they were used to navigating these kinds of situations, subtle, quiet, dismissive. "Sir?" the tall one said, nodding in a way that almost looked respectful. "I'm gonna need to see your credentials." Elijah blinked. "Excuse me? Are you on the guest list?" "Yes, I registered online." "I'm here for my son, Cadet Micah Briggs." The short guard looked down at a clipboard, flipping through pages, clearly not actually searching. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, not sounding sorry at all, "but your name doesn't seem to be on the main guest list. We've had a few reports of someone loitering near the exits. We just need you to come with us and verify." Elijah frowned, the weight of 1,000 humiliations pressing onto his shoulders at once. His voice stayed calm, his jaw locked. Not loitering, I'm standing, because there's no seat." "Understood," the taller guard said quickly. "But if we could just step outside for a moment." "No," Elijah said, sharper now. "My son is on that stage." A few nearby. Parents turned. One woman whispered something to her husband. Elijah could feel their eyes on him like heat. "Sir," the short one said, his voice lowering, "we don't want to make this difficult." "And I don't want to miss my son's graduation," Elijah replied. He reached into his inner coat pocket and slowly pulled out his military ID. "This says who I am. This says what I've done." The taller guard barely glanced at the ID. The short one didn't even pretend. "Still," he muttered, "we'd prefer to verify outside." Elijah's fists curled, but he kept his composure. His breathing deepened, slow and measured. "Is this like in combat?" just like when everything around him was chaos and the only thing that kept him alive was staying calm. Micah had noticed the movement from the stage. From where he sat, he could see two men in black security uniforms and his father rigid, stoic, silent. Something was wrong. His grip tightened on the arms of his chair when Elijah was finally escorted voluntarily, yet unmistakably toward the doors. Micah rose to his feet. The entire auditorium noticed that he didn't say anything at first. He just stared. Then, without asking, he stepped away from his chair and walked off the stage, ignoring the dean's confused look. "Micah?" One instructor called. "Where are you going?" He didn't answer. Elijah paused near the exit as Micah disappeared behind the curtain. He didn't want to cause a scene. Didn't want to be the reason the day turned into a spectacle. He could hear the dean trying to cover it all up. "Let's keep the program moving. Our next recipient is..." But even as the next cadet's name was called, the atmosphere had shifted. A low murmur began, building like a storm. Back in the hallway, one of the guards turned his back to radio someone. The other stood watch like Elijah might bolt. Elijah didn't move. His hands rested gently at his sides, his chin held high. He was used to this feeling, being scrutinized, being underestimated, being asked to prove himself when the proof was written all over his chest, but he wasn't angry. Not yet. He was simply waiting, and what he didn't know, what the guards didn't see coming, was that somewhere in the crowd, in different corners of the room, 6 men had taken note of what just happened. 6 men who owed their lives to Elijah. Briggs, 6 men who had trained under him, fought beside him, bled because he told them to hold the line and lived, because they listened, and those 6 men had just stood up from their seats. Inside the auditorium, the atmosphere had soured. The faculty tried to keep things rolling, but the disturbance hadn't gone unnoticed. The chatter hadn't died down like it normally would. Parents leaned toward each other in whispers, exchanging quick glances toward the back of the hall, where a man in full dress blues had just been escorted out. Micah wasn't on stage anymore. He was gone, vanished behind the side curtain. The dean glanced at his notes, flustered. "We'll continue the ceremony," he said into the mic, forcing a smile. "Our next graduate is..." But no one heard the name, outside in the hallway. Elijah stood with his back straight, hands behind him, jaw set like stone. One of the guards was speaking into a walkie-talkie. "Yeah, we've got him outside. Standing by. Am I being detained?" Elijah asked. The older guard didn't answer. The younger one gave a quick shake of the head. "Just verifying, sir. Shouldn't take long." "I told you I registered 2 months ago." "We've had issues before," the older one replied. "People slipping in without credentials." Elijah's fingers twitched, but he didn't respond. He'd faced worse than this. He'd stared down Taliban checkpoints, buried friends in silence, walked out of burning Humvees with blood in his eyes. But this, being humiliated in front of his son on one of the most important days of the boy's life? This stung deeper than shrapnel. Back inside, something was shifting. 6 men, scattered throughout the audience, had noticed the moment the guards approached Elijah. They hadn't spoken to each other, didn't need to. They'd all been watching. These weren't regular guests. They weren't parents of graduates or local politicians here for the photo op. They were men from units that didn't exist on paper. Men who didn't wear uniforms today because their work demanded otherwise. Quiet men. Dangerous men. And all 6 of them knew Elijah Briggs. Not just knew. They owed him. Commander Jocks Turner was the first to move. He stood slowly, deliberately, and adjusted his coat as he walked toward the side entrance. His eyes scanned the crowd as if daring someone to stop him. Behind him, 2 others followed: Chief Warrant Officer Malik Green and Petty Officer Chris Dice Daly. The remaining 3 flanked the opposite aisle, breaking off from their seats with precise timing. Not a word was spoken between them. Not a single glance exchanged. But every footstep hit the floor like a silent drumbeat. Back in the hallway, Elijah had had enough. "I don't need to be verified," he said, flatly. "If this is about how I look, say it. If it's about what I'm wearing, say it. But don't insult my intelligence with this game." "Sir," the younger guard began, clearly uncomfortable now, "we're just following protocol." "Protocol?" Elijah muttered. Right. That's when the doors behind them swung open. Jocks Turner stepped into the hallway, hands in his coat pockets, expression unreadable. The guards tensed slightly as the other 5 men appeared behind him, forming a loose semicircle. Elijah, Jocks said, his voice low but firm. Elijah looked up. His eyes softened for a split second before hardening again. Jocks? The guards exchanged nervous glances. Something wrong? Jocks asked casually, looking at the older guard. Private matter, the man replied. Security issue. Jocks's tone sharpened just enough to draw blood. Is it? Look, sir, we're trying to determine he's on the guest list. Jocks said flatly. I checked it myself. He are SVP twice. The older guard squinted. And you are? Jocks smiled without warmth. Commander Jackson Turner. Naval Special Warfare. You want the ID too? The guard hesitated. I also have 2 admirals on speed dial, Jocks added. But we can get to that part later. The hallway went still. 1. Of the other S, else Dice stepped forward and locked eyes with the younger guard. That man. Dice said, pointing to Elijah, trained half of us. He's the reason we came home. The older guard looked like he wanted to argue, but his mouth stayed shut. Elijah glanced at Jocks. You didn't have to. Yeah, I did, Jocks interrupted. Come on, let's go back inside. Elijah hesitated. I don't want to cause a scene. Jocks tilted his head toward the door. Too late for that. Besides, it's not a scene. It's correction. The group turned. Elijah now in the center. They moved as one. Inside the auditorium, murmurs filled the air again as the 6 men re-entered. Some people stood instinctively. Others just stared, confused. Micah was back on stage, holding the mic. He looked different now, less like a cadet, more like a soldier. His jaw clenched. I'm not accepting anything, he said, his voice echoing through the PA system, until someone tells me why my father was removed. A ripple of tension surged through the audience. Faculty members whispered frantically. My father, Micah continued, is Master Sergeant Elijah Briggs. He served this country for over 20 years, 2 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and he raised me alone after my mother died. People were standing. Now phones were raised. Some parents looked ashamed. And yet, Micah said, gesturing toward the aisle where Elijah now stood surrounded by the 6 SEALs, he was just escorted out like a trespasser. Elijah froze at the base of the aisle, unsure. Then the dean tried to speak. Micah, perhaps this isn't the appropriate. No, Micah snapped. This is exactly the place. You don't get to talk about honor and integrity from that stage while my father stands in the hallway because someone thought he didn't belong. Silence. Then Jocks stepped forward, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. I second that, he said. And then another voice. I third. I fourth. All 6 SEALs stood shoulder to shoulder now, facing the front. Micah raised the mic again. This uniform means nothing, he said, if we don't know how to respect the people who built the road we're walking on. He turned and looked at his father. Come up here, Dad. Elijah hesitated, eyes misting. Please, Micah added, his voice softening. Stand with me. And slowly, almost reluctantly, Elijah Briggs began walking down the aisle. No one stopped him. No one dared. The long walk down the aisle was eerily silent. At first, no words, no announcements, no fanfare. Just the soft, echoing taps of Elijah's dress shoes against the polished wood floor and the rustle of people shifting in their seats, unsure of what to do, what to feel, how to respond to what they were witnessing. A man once pushed aside was now the center of the entire room's attention, not because he demanded it, but because his son had reclaimed it for him. Micah stood tall on the stage, waiting, his chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. He hadn't prepared a speech. He hadn't planned for any of this, but nothing had ever felt more right. The mic in his hand trembled slightly, but his voice didn't when he spoke again. I used to sit on my front porch as a kid, he began, watching the other dads play catch with their sons. Mine wasn't around a lot, not because he didn't care, but because he was serving. Every deployment was a gamble. Every return was a blessing. And when he did come home, he didn't brag. He didn't talk about what he'd seen, what he'd survived, or what it had cost him. He just grilled burgers, patched my bike tires, and made sure I knew how to shave properly. A few in the audience chuckled quietly. Others lowered their heads. I didn't understand then what kind of strength it took to carry that silence, to walk through fire and come back gentle. Elijah reached the steps of the stage, unsure whether he should ascend. For a moment he lingered, torn between dignity and discomfort. Jock stepped forward from the aisle, his voice low but audible. To those near the front, "You've walked through worse terrain, Sergeant. Step up." The 6 SEALs shifted subtly, forming a loose perimeter at the front, blocking any possible interference, though it was clear now that no one would dare try. Micah extended his hand to his father, and Elijah, finally, took the steps one at a time, slow and steady. His knees ached, but his pride did not. When he reached the stage, the crowd began to clap. It started small, a few hands, a few rows, then the back of the room, then the faculty, then the parents, then the cadets, all of them on their feet. The applause roared, rolling through the auditorium. Like thunder, not polite or perfunctory, but raw and righteous. A recognition long overdue. A correction written not on paper, but in the way people rose from their chairs without instruction. Elijah stood beside Micah, unsure what to do with the attention. His hands instinctively moved behind his back, parade dress posture, but Micah gently nudged him forward toward the microphone. "I didn't come here to speak," Elijah said finally, voice deep and gravelly. "I only came to watch." He paused, scanning the room slowly. His gaze didn't carry judgment, only presence. There was something in his eyes that silenced the clapping even faster than it had started. "But since I've been given the mic," he continued, "let me say this. I didn't serve this country so that my son could be awarded honors while I was being shown the door. I didn't bleed in foreign sand so I could be treated like a suspect on home soil." You could hear a pin drop. "I'm not angry," Elijah said. "I'm not bitter, but I am tired. Tired of being seen as a threat before being seen as a man. Tired of having to prove I belong in rooms I already earned my way into. And I know I'm not the only one." Some parents shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded slowly. The dean stood in the wings, face blank, his earlier smile long gone. Micah placed a hand on his father's shoulder. Elijah looked at him, and for the first time in years, the old Marine's voice cracked. "But today, my son made me feel seen, fully, publicly, proudly. So if I leave this auditorium with anything, it's not shame, it's joy. Because the next generation's already braver than the last." The crowd erupted again, this time louder, stronger, purer. Tears streamed down the face of a young cadet in the front row. A woman in the middle section clutched her husband's hand tightly. One of the guards who had escorted Elijah out earlier stood stiffly near the door. Unsure whether to retreat or apologize, the dean hesitated, then walked forward, clearing his throat at the edge of the stage. "If I may," he said nervously, "on behalf of the Academy, I would like to sincerely apologize to Master Sergeant Briggs. This incident was not reflective of our values." Jock stepped up beside Elijah and took the mic before Elijah could respond. "You say it's not reflective," Jock said, voice sharp, "but it happened in your house. Under your banner. The apology's a start, but change is better. Make sure no other parent, no other veteran, no other human being walks into this place and gets asked to leave for the way they look." The dean's face flushed red. He gave a curt nod and stepped back. Micah turned to the podium, diploma in hand now, and raised it into the air. "This," he said, "isn't just mine, it's his. It's my father's. Everything I've earned, I earned because of the sacrifices he made when no one was watching." He handed the diploma to Elijah. "So if there's anyone who should be celebrated today, it's not me. It's the man who got me here." The final standing ovation was more than applause. It was a collective reckoning, a letting go of assumptions. A learning moment written in flesh and blood, not textbooks and speeches. The 6 SEALs remained silent, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like the protectors they'd been trained to be. But one by one, each man gave a small nod, first to Elijah, then to Micah, The ceremony ended later than scheduled, but no one seemed to mind. Photos were taken. Strangers came up to shake Elijah's hand. Some simply touched his arm and said, "Thank you." Others apologized, visibly emotional. For many, it wasn't just a graduation ceremony anymore. It was a confrontation with conscience. Outside, the sun had begun to set, casting golden light across the parking lot. Micah and Elijah walked side by side, the crowd behind them dispersing. Slowly, "You okay, Dad?" Micah asked, glancing over. Elijah took a long breath. "I think I am now." They walked in silence for a few moments before Micah chuckled. "What?" Elijah asked. Micah grinned. "You still walk like you're marching," Elijah snorted. "Can't teach an old Marine new tricks." Micah looked ahead, then back at the academy building. "Today, I felt like we changed something." Elijah nodded slowly. "We didn't change the world, but we changed the room, and sometimes that's how it starts." The two of them climbed into Elijah's old truck, metals still clinking softly with each movement. And as the engine rumbled to life, the world outside felt just a little more awake. Just a little more, just enough.